going forward, if I ever acquired another business, that would probably be my number one sort of green flag would be.
All right, Matt Stevenson, thank you so much for joining me today. You made your first acquisition, which was Bizstats in 2022, which, as I understand, is a data aggregator, and then made your second acquisition 3 years later, being New Zealand BizBuySell and a couple of one or two other brands under that. But I'd love to hear the story. Take us back to where it all began. How did you end up buying a business, being Bizstats?
Hey, thanks for having me. First off, it's quite a long-winded story, so I'll try and keep it short. But so I guess in terms of background, I started off doing professional services. So I was in M&A consulting. So started off in more the restructuring side, then went into a little bit more of the M&A valuation side of things. And in that work saw like a lot of, really successful business owners because I was working in Big Four environment. So you see the guys who've done very well. But some of that work was looking at, people who were in liquidation and receivership, so it hadn't worked out quite so well. And you could sort of see like some of these people had great years and they'd done really well. And often it was, through usually fault of their own, that they'd ended up in these positions where their business was struggling. And I sort of saw what they were doing and thought, wow, if they could, they had great businesses, but they just couldn't manage them very well in the long term. This just gives me real confidence that I could go out and sort of, to make it without making those same mistakes and sort of learning from their mistakes up front. So that was a good entry. But so I did that for probably 6-7 years. And then it just never satisfied me. I just never felt the itch scratched. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. They're all farmers doing different things in farming. So really, I just wanted to scratch that itch of entrepreneurship. Tried a few different things while I was working, which is really hard. Doesn't really work unless you put it all in. So I went to my boss at the accounting firm I was working at and said, "Oh, look, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go find a job that I can switch off at 5 o'clock and I'm going to go try and find a business." And then a little bit later, he asked, after I left, he asked me, "Oh, what have you seen out there?" And I said, "Oh, I haven't really seen much. There's this company called Bizstats that we used to use when I was in Big Four accounting for data valuation. I think it's awesome data, but the product is rubbish. Like it is literally email this 60-year-old man and he'll spend 3 days getting back to you and then it'll take you a week to get a report." And he said, "Well, what have you done about it?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I can't find any information." The next day he emailed me with the contact details that he'd found on the internet. I don't know how he found them. So I rang them and then that started the conversation. And so it took me basically a year to convince them to sell. And in that time, I was sort of looking at other things, but not seriously. All the while I'd taken a job at a bank doing sort of financial analyst work. So as I said, it's quite long-winded. Like I took a little while to get there. I knew I always probably wanted to get into business ownership. For some people, it seems to happen quickly. For me, I sort of took my time in getting there. I don't regret that because I learned some really valuable things in getting there. So yeah, 2022, I was about to have our second child, and the settlement date was supposed to be 2 days after the planned date for the C-section. And I had to say, I think we should move it out just 1 month. So my wife was pretty stoked that it
The settlement date or the C-section?
Settlement. So yeah, couldn't quite move the C-section date, unfortunately. Yeah. They're a little bit harder deadline than settlement. But yeah, so a month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old running around. Sort of bought my first business. Was still working full-time. This is Bizstats. Still working full-time and running this on nights, mornings, weekends. Yeah, and that was the entry. That's how I started.
Amazing. And tell me about that business. I mean, the multiple that you bought it for, I'm not sure if you can really get into the sort of high level, like revenue or rough, like what size of business are we kind of dealing with?
We're
And was there
talking
any staff in there or Tell me
Yeah,
about
so basically the background was it's data aggregation. So we basically have relationships with a lot of the business brokers in New Zealand. They supply us with their sales data and then we consolidate that and we sell it out to firms doing valuation, usually accounting firms. So it's a really valuable data set. The reason why I was keen to get my hands on it was because, we would use Capital IQ at the Big Four, that big market transaction data, which is really valuable. And then we would also use this. So I saw, okay, even Big Four accounting firms are having to use this data because there's this massive gap between Cap IQ and sort of your mum and dad businesses. So there was one guy running it he could have even been in his 70s, honestly. And he was sort of, dare I say, he was running it into the ground. He wasn't the owner. The owner had passed away some years ago, was a well-respected business broker in New Zealand, and his son and daughter owned it, but they had no idea what the business was really doing or how to operate it. So this guy was running it, doing a pretty poor job. And so, yeah, it was really hard to buy, is what I would say, because you're dealing with owners who actually don't understand their own business. They didn't want me to talk to the guy who was running it because if he got wind that it was for sale, he might decide that he's going to leave, and then they would have no one to step in and run it. So my lawyer thought I was crazy for taking a year to just keep going, just keep grinding away to buy it. But at the end of the day, I sort of thought the fundamentals and the value in the data was there. And I could see how you could make it a better product. So I was pretty keen to push forward, even though there's probably way too many red flags. But hey, that's learning. Like I think that's taught me heaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
I see it a lot.
multiples.
Go ahead.
So like I would say it was probably like a 3.5 times STE, but this business has very little overhead. It's very, like a very good margin, but it's small. We're talking like tiny business, like buying a job size business. And I sort of did that because I thought, okay, well, I can still keep my job. I can figure out a way to run it and sort of bootstrap it into being a lot more efficient so that I'm actually not having to respond. The initial idea was to keep on the guy who was working in it and running it. But after about a week, it turned out he was trying to fleece me on some of his pricing structure that I didn't understand when I signed his contractors agreement. So I let him go after a week and then just sort of ran it myself with every spare minute that I could find in the day.
And your experience is kind of like highlights the toss up between dealing with or going through business brokers when you're looking for a business versus running your own search, where business brokers is like, this business is ready for sale.
Yep.
And then when you reach out to guys, it's like, hey, would you consider selling? What was it that brought them over the line, or how did their attitude sort of change over that 12 months that you were pulling them?
I think I probably just wore them down, like legitimately. So like, I think they sort of saw that, they knew that they had to do something because the business wasn't operating as well as it should be. And if it continued on, it would probably just wind down to nothing. And I was, sort of, I was going above and beyond and showing them what it could be and selling my sort of picture of what the business could eventually become. And, it was pretty important for them because their dad who'd passed away, it was a sort of something he had started from scratch and had really enjoyed doing. And so they didn't want to see it wind down to nothing either. So selling the story, it's the same thing for brokered deals as proprietary search. I think you have to sell yourself to the seller because they're, a lot of them are concerned with the legacy of the business, and rightly so, because they've spent, people have spent a lot of time and money and effort getting them to where they are. They don't want to see it run into the ground. But yes, proprietary search is hard, and I said I would never do it again, but I did do it again for the second acquisition. So yeah, but I'd learned heaps, but it was still hard and still took ages. And still had similar issues.
I think that's where the really good deals sort of come from, if you have the patience and the time to really massage the sellers and take them through that learning curve.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you ran that business for a number of years before you bought the second one. Actually, before we even get into the operation stuff, did you just fund it all cash? You use some bank debt? How did you structure this?
So part cash, part bank debt. We got really lucky, and I sort of like really want to state this because people in their 30s. It's not like we're, the baby boomer generation who, are swimming in cash right now. It's definitely hard out there. And I see it every day talking to people trying to buy businesses. Like, how the hell am I going to even conjure this together to make it work? But we got really lucky with the COVID house price boom, post-COVID house price boom in New Zealand. So we'd bought a house in 2019, just best financial decision we ever made. It just happened to fluke it. Our house doubled in value, so we had all this equity there to use to purchase the business. So without that, I couldn't have done it. But that was just pure luck, right? And that's, I think, probably the hardest thing for the people to get their heads around today and to make work is that funding side of it. So it's partly luck. I wish I could say I was my great financial maneuvering and everything, but it was mostly luck.
Awesome. And then you got into the business. We got rid of that guy, like we talked about, and you're pretty much running it 100% yourself. What were the main things that you changed in the business, and how did you go about actually growing it and increasing that top line, or did it grow? What does the business look like now compared to when you bought it?
So when I bought it, it was more or less, I think it was Microsoft Access was the system. It was like, I worked with databases at work for years. It's too old for me to have seen. Like, it's so old. Like, it was real. It was like a really weird Excel spreadsheet thing. And so basically all transactions were done over email, invoiced out. So the guy who ran it, it was pretty much a full-time job. So there was someone working almost full-time. And I sort of thought, well, this could be just an online platform. People can log in, order their records, get some good data, check out with a credit card. So it probably took a year to go from the purchase through to that change. But then it went from me working sort of like, I used to get up at like 4:30 in the morning, answer emails, send out invoices, send out samples, and then I'd do it again at night. And then I hired a developer. He developed out the product and launched that. And then it basically went to almost no time commitment at all, which is amazing. So we changed the pricing model a little bit. I think you'll find in a lot of these businesses, and the two I've bought, case in point, is that there's no real consideration over pricing changes. They stick with the price and they just roll that through forever. It's amazing. So change the pricing, change the platform. We grew revenue by 50%. And I'm talking, it's a really low base, so it sounds more amazing than it is, but doing that at the same time as reducing the sort of cost to serve or time to serve to next to zero was probably the biggest change, right? So I could sort of just let it run during the day. I get a little ping on my phone, someone's made a sale. Great. I don't really have to manage it too much day to day. I haven't achieved all that I'd like to achieve in that timeline with this business. There's definitely still way more untapped potential. But I think like the big change in the last 6 months is, I had to hire a developer for $180 an hour to develop this product in the first place. That's really expensive when it's just a tiny little business, just, doing small numbers. Now with AI, man, like the cost to deliver, like if it had been 2-3 years later, I probably could have produced something similar. Like, all credit to the developer. He did a great job, but it would have been a hell of a lot less cost for me to develop where it is now. But hey, that's timing, right? And now we just rebuild everything all the time because code is so disposable and so cheap to produce. You can just replicate on top, keep going. So yeah, we got all the things that we wanted to achieve that were sort of like too expensive. We can now looking at again because we realize, okay, well, with these AI coding tools and there's a lot more potential to achieve that within a small business budget.
Absolutely. And growing the top line by 50% is incredible at any size, for considering, obviously it would be a great return on investment right from the get-go. So
yeah,
that's it. And then fast forward 3 years, you end up beginning to look for another business again, or were you looking that whole time and then the opportunity came up, or how did that happen?
No. So it was probably, 2 years later, I was sort of thinking like, so in between, like, I didn't know what ETA was prior to buying Bizstats. I'd never heard of it, never read any of the books, never done anything. And then I did the classic thing of reading Buy Then Build and the HBR guide, and sort of thought, okay, these are all the mistakes I made with buying Bizstats, just namely probably too small and a few different things. And I sort of thought, okay, well, I can either just park that and go do something different, because it does look after itself a little bit, as much as any business can, right? No business is really, completely self-sufficient, or I can look at bolting something on and making it more of a, something I can do full time, because I was still working full time at the bank while I was doing this. So 2 years in, and then I sort of thought, okay, well, what are the logical things that I could do within the sort of business for sale space? We're in one end of the market, which is when brokers have finished sale, they provide us their data, or when they're doing an appraisal, we give them the data. So there's a whole business sales process through the middle, which we don't cover. So I sort of started looking, okay, what are the service providers in that timeline? And the logical one was listing platforms. And there's, Australia's got quite a few, but New Zealand actually only has sort of two really that are worth looking at. One is Trade Me. Not going to buy Trade Me. It's a publicly listed company, and you're not going to get your hands on that. And the other was NZ BizBuySell. And so I literally just did the exact same thing as I did with Bizstats. Called up the owner, Richard, and I think I sort of sold it as, we could work together and we could do some stuff together, and I'll come down and see you. My plan the whole time was to ask him if he wanted to sell his business. But yeah, so just went and saw him, had a 2-hour catch up, good talking to other people who are working in the same industry and doing things you are. And at the end said, are you thinking about selling your business at all? And I think he knew, because he smiled, nodded his head. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. So
He was kind of hoping for that question to come the whole time. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but So that was, when was that? That must have been 2024. And then the exact same thing. Took a whole year to get the sale over the line, and plenty of moments where it was like, does he actually want to sell? Does he not? There was a lot. It was that full roller coaster of like, you could see him dealing, like, through email correspondence, you could see him dealing with the reality of selling his business. So yeah, took way longer than I would have liked. But again, my lawyer was like, man, you are stubborn. Most people would probably give up. But, again, I think that's proprietary deals in a nutshell. Unless you are willing to like really go at it and make the deal work, it's just never going to happen.
And that business was considerably larger than the first one you bought, or is it kind of the same sort of structure where it's owner operated and they're really sort of roughing it in terms of their own processes and procedures? They're just doing it all themselves.
It was definitely more sophisticated, like far more sophisticated than Bizstats. It's probably like 5 times the revenue, and it had so it was the owner, a developer, part-time, sales consultant, and then he had admin staff as well, part-time. So I went, Bizstats had no staff. It was just me, and I got it to the point where it hardly even needed me to operate day to day. So yeah, quite different going to something that actually had some more people involved, and you couldn't just run it yourself. And so yeah.
And
but yeah, it was bigger. I was acquiring something bigger, right? So small fry coming to take a bite out of the bigger shark.
Great. And the rough multiple that you bought that one for, and how did you structure that deal?
So that, I think it was, it wasn't even 12 months ago, so I should know this off the top of my head, but I want to say it was like closer to 4 than it's 3.5 for Bizstats, probably closer to 4 for NZ BizBuySell. But similarly, I sort of saw ways that you could probably change it and quickly, bump up that revenue a little bit. And it, you could sort of see how there's a path to like building that bottom line up so that it doesn't feel so big, like quickly. If you don't see that, it gets hard to justify those numbers. But again, it's like, I sort of see it in Bizstats data, things that are relocatable. It's got recurring revenue. It's been around for 25 years. It's, like well respected. It's, in the industry. It's already aligned with the people I'm already dealing with in Bizstats. It's the exact same brokers. So I didn't have to build up new relationships. They already know me. And there's massive synergistic play between the data play and the listing play, which we haven't even started to dive into yet. So maybe there's a little bit of, synergistic uplift in that multiple, just because I was the right person to want to buy it. So yeah, I was happy to pay it, even though, the magic's in the multiple is what they say, but for me, the magic was in the opportunity and already being in that space.
Absolutely. And you've since finished up at the bank now and you're working on this full time, or are you still at the bank?
Yes. So I probably finished, only maybe a month or so ago. I was just doing 1 day a week contracting just for a handover. So yeah, now I'm full time. Absolutely loving it. I said to my wife, like after our usual Christmas break in New Zealand, I said, this is the first year I have not absolutely dreaded going back to work after the Christmas break. Usually I'm like grim. I do not want to go back to the office. So yeah, even though it's way more stressful, I'm way happier doing it. So yeah, talk to me in a couple of years. This hairline might be back
Yeah,
here,
let's see
but
how that goes.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And how was the experience with that business? I mean, once you got in there, what sort of things did you change, if anything? Did you have any oh crap moments in either of the businesses where you thought, what have I done?
Yeah,
Maybe I've sort of put too much money into this thing. Am I going to get it back?
yeah. I think
Talk to me about the challenges.
yeah, I think I'm still having oh crap moments with Bizstats now. So I don't think those change. Yeah, there was definitely to go back to Bizstats, there was definitely a moment where because they wouldn't let me talk to the operator during the due diligence, I was going on what information the sort of son and daughter of the founder could tell me, but because they didn't know it in and out, they really couldn't tell me very much. So, so there was definitely a moment there where I got in and I was like, oh, okay, they've made some misrepresentations here. Like I could probably make a claim on some warranties and thing. But the more I thought about it, and because it was only small, I just thought, nah, just push on, just carry on. I think you just tie yourself in knots trying to deal with that. So that was a bit of a oh crap moment. And then I would say and especially when I decided to fire the operator after 1 week, that was God, how the hell am I going to do this working full time and making this work? So the big difference between the two was that for NZ BizBuySell, Richard, the founder, he was staying on board. So he's still working 1 day a week for me at the moment. And that handover was like chalk and cheese with buying Bizstats. So he was amazing, teach me everything, was more than happy, wanted me to be successful in the acquisition. And I would say probably going forward, if I ever acquired another business, that would probably be my number one sort of green flag would be, is the owner a genuine person? Literally, I think that matters beyond anything you can see in the financials, anything. If you have a lot of trust with the owner, the seller, that goes much further than anything else that I've seen. It just made my life a
Yeah.
hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see, and I've kind of also been guilty of this in the past, is trying to structure the deal in a way that keeps the owner involved and keeps them incentivized and in all the right ways, of course, but really tying them in with what we call kind of golden handcuffs. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there's nothing like, just you're going into business with this person effectively, whether they
Yep.
are contracted to stick around or not. And so having someone with the attitude of, I'm going to come and I'm going to show up and I'm going to bring my best for this new person that's going to take over the business because I genuinely care about where the business is going and I care about my legacy is going to be, invaluable. And I suppose you can't put any price or condition or warranty on the way that ends up working.
Nah. And that's why second time around I did take some vendor finance. I didn't need the vendor's finance necessarily, but I sort of learned from the first time around that it's better to have money, better to have that negotiating chip if something does go wrong post settlement to be able to say, well, we need to talk about this quantum of vendor finance. Is it, whether we hold on to it or we renegotiate. I couldn't do that. It's too hard. Bizstats, I couldn't ask them for money back. It would just be a mess. So I thought it was pretty important to do that. And that was a big learning for me first time around. Haven't
Absolutely.
needed it yet, touch wood, but yeah, big learning.
Great. And break that deal down for us if you can. How much was cash or your own equity? How much was bank debt? How much was that vendor finance portion? Or if you can't share, it would be great to know just about the vendor finance
Yeah,
element, because that's
so this is the interesting part, was like, because it was quite heavily bank debted, and I had got agreement for more vendor finance for a higher quantum, but because of the rate on that vendor finance, the bank lend, like, it just tipped the scales on the bank lending. So the bank was keen for me to have more bank lending than vendor finance, but I wanted more vendor finance for protection. But so we actually ended up with probably only, like, I would say it was about not even 10% vendor finance, and then most of the rest of it was debt. And then I had not taken a cent out of Bizstats for those 3 years. So I poured all of that back in. Anything that I hadn't spent on very expensive developers, good but expensive developers, I poured into that acquisition as well. So yeah, there's some debt in there now, but it's carrying it. So like, I think some people get scared off by that debt. I don't really lose sleep over it. I'm confident that I can just work hard to make this work. So yeah,
and if you buy the right business with sticky customers, and I mean, you're dealing with accountants, business
that's it.
brokers, like these
That's
guys
it.
are not, it's not a super
It's
volatile customer base.
it's
With
B2B.
what you said, there's only one alternative or one
Yeah,
competitor
so
for
there's
NZ
only one
BizBuySell.
competitor. Yeah, there's only one
Yeah,
competitor.
yeah.
Bizstats is a monopoly. There is no other data provider for SME data. So that gave me confidence to be like, okay, well, there's not, especially with Bizstats, I couldn't get certainty on a lot of things because the sellers just didn't know. But because of its monopoly position, I was like, okay, sweet. No competitor is going to come in overnight and sink you, so you should be fine. Should.
Fantastic.
I mean, like,
Should.
I love to say there's like more, like, rigor around some of these decisions, but honestly, I think like a lot of people in the sort of ETA space, from what I see, just like over-analyze everything and just never actually do anything because it's scary. And so, like, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were, they're trying to buy a business, and they were saying, oh, like, we can't offer this because we don't know the business. I said to them, look, you aren't going to know the business until you've probably owned it for a year. You probably still won't even know the business. Like, this is a risky endeavor, like inherently risky. So you need to be comfortable to take that risk.
And you've got the accolades to give that advice, because I mean, you literally, in my notes now, I put while you were speaking, you literally bought a business without seeing it. It's almost like buying a house during COVID and not being able to inspect it,
I
because
wouldn't say yeah, like I
you
saw,
couldn't
like,
speak to the guy that was doing the stuff.
no, I couldn't. I
Yeah.
could see the shape of it, but like,
Yeah.
usually in a DD process, you would definitely want to see more than what I saw. And I'm running my own DD. I'm not using a third party provider.
Sure.
And I mean, because they're small, right? If I was to buy something
Yeah.
bigger and I would buy something now, I would absolutely go and use professionals. Like, I've enough experience to be dangerous, but you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, I would just not suggest people do that. Like, as a hands down rule, but still, you got to take some risk. That's what we're here for.
And how are these businesses working together? Or if they're not already, what are your plans? Sort of the synergistic stuff that you were touching on.
Yeah.
Are they going to be sort of growing into each other, moving into the future?
Yeah. So endless ideas, right? But the basics of it is basically that thing is here's where a business sale starts and here where it ends. How do we fill all the gaps that need to be filled in the middle? So we have people visiting our NZ BizBuySell site who are looking to put an offer in on a business, and this Bizstats business has data that could help inform their offer. Like, it's just the logical, it's pretty easy to see where we could sort of tie things together. And then brokers who are selling, where we can see exactly how they're performing because we've got their listings and we're sort of connected with them in a more intimate way. Than in Bizstats, we're just sitting there waiting for them to pop us a submission. Whereas in NZ BizBuySell, we are seeing their their listings and how they're performing and when they do eventually sell. So there is a lot of integration that we can do, but I haven't rushed into it either because, and I think that's like generally the advice in the ETA world is first 6 months. That's what everyone says. First 6 months, don't make too many changes. So I haven't rocked the boat too much yet with the NZ BizBuySell.
And then what comes next? Do you have your eyes on, if not specific businesses, at least conceptually in terms of what other types of businesses that you want to buy to fit into this customer journey?
So that's where it gets like a little bit more complicated because like at the moment, I'm probably not really focused on acquisition in this space. Like, if something comes up, like, sure, absolutely, I would look at any opportunity, but I've probably sort of maxed out my acquisition capital for now. So it's about sort of bedding down again and making sure we've got a good platform and we're, a resilient business. But, like funnily enough, I'm sort of, looking at other opportunities completely outside of the space as well. So I've got a mate who I've been working with for a while, and we're sort of looking at opportunities. Told him, let's not do proprietary search. And what are we doing? We're talking to people who aren't for sale. And
Of course.
here we go again. But so I think I don't know. I probably should have just gone and been a business broker because I really like the deals side of it. Like that would have been a far simpler path. But here we are, and I don't know.
I mean,
I just really enjoy it.
Pretty close to that now with NZ BizBuySell.
Yeah, well, that's it.
A brokerage website. Yeah. So now you're going and doing it all again. What mistakes or what advice would you give your 5 years, 3 years younger self? And what are you avoiding in terms of pitfalls apart from obviously making the going and doing proprietary search again?
Yeah. So I guess what we're sort of doing now, and I'm working with a partner this time. Like that's probably number one, right? I'm not doing it by myself. I've done it by myself twice. There's advantages and disadvantages to that. Like I get to make all the decisions. I don't have to bounce it off anyone. But at the same time, taking a year to buy each business by yourself is a very lonely endeavor where it's bouncing around in your head and you just keep nagging your wife about it every night. Like she's over it by the time you've bought it. It's not a celebration. It's like, oh God, thank God, it's a relief. So yeah, not going at it alone this time. And probably just like the size. I started off too small, and that's a function of what I could afford to do and what made sense for me at that stage. But it's hard because I think this time round I'm more just focused on, all right, let's just get the right multiple and then let's just go from there. Like let's just, and it's like, sort of a similar thing where it's about, what's the term? Like bias to action, like actually just go and do it. And I think like, things flow from actually just taking action. So not being scared by a little bit of hair on the deal and it's not looking perfect. And speed is the other one too that I think people like. I made so many mistakes. Like we've made other offers. We spent like a week doing a model on how this business, how we could finance it. And you turn around and make an offer, and they say no, like within the first 5 minutes. So why did I bother spending a week modeling out this acquisition when they were just going to say no in 5 minutes because our offer was like not even close to what they were after? So yeah. Those are sorts of the things that I'm thinking about now. But yeah, it's just fun. I love this. Like this like really excites me. I really love like business acquisition. It's just such a cool thing to do.
Awesome. Matt, well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about your journey with the 2 acquisitions you made. For people that want to speak to you, how can they find you if they want to ask any advice or more about your experience?
Yeah, I'd probably LinkedIn's the best place. I'd like to say I'm really good at checking, so bear with me because I'm pretty busy, but I will definitely get back to you if you message me. So yeah, LinkedIn's definitely the place to get hold of me. Cool.
Thank you so much for coming on.
So easy.
That's it. Cheers.
No worries. Thanks, mate.